In the sun-scorched dust of Dusthaven, a frontier town rotting under the shadow of greed and fear, the stagecoach lay overturned like a broken animal. Its strongbox had been pried open, and the driver hung half out the window with a bullet through his chest. The Colton gang, led by the vicious Silas Colton, stood laughing in the middle of the empty main street, while terrified shopkeepers and families watched from behind shuttered windows and cracked doors. No one dared move. No one dared speak. Then came the sound of hooves. Slow, deliberate. A lone rider entered town on a black horse that seemed to swallow the sunlight. Tall in the saddle, dressed in a dark duster coated with trail dust, his face hidden beneath the wide brim of a weathered hat. They called him Gunslinger. No first name, no last name, just Gunslinger. Silas Colton, a thick-bearded brute with a scar running ear to chin, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt and grinned. "Well now, Gunslinger, you picked a bad day to ride through Dusthaven. This here's our town. Turn around and keep riding if you want to see tomorrow's sunrise." Gunslinger said nothing. His horse kept walking forward at the same steady pace until it stopped 10 yards from the gang. 6 men, all armed, all watching him with the hungry eyes of wolves who smelled easy meat. One of Colton's men, a skinny gunhawk with a notched rifle, laughed nervously. "Boss, this fool's either deaf or stupid." Still, Gunslinger remained silent, his cold gaze sweeping across the gang, then to the dead driver, then to the overturned coach. A young woman named Abilene had been pulled from the wrecked stage and was being held roughly by the arms, her dress torn and her eyes wide with terror. Gunslinger's voice finally came, low and flat, carrying across the street like distant thunder. "Let the woman go." Colton threw his head back and roared with laughter. "You got sand, I'll give you that. But you're alone, Gunslinger. Ain't no law left in this town worth a damn. We are the law. Now get off that horse before we put you in the ground next to the driver." Gunslinger slowly dismounted. His boots hit the dirt with a soft thud. He stood motionless for a heartbeat, the black horse unmoving behind him like a shadow given form. Then, with unnatural calm, he took one step forward. The first gunshot shattered the silence. The first gunshot cracked like dry lightning. One of Colton's men had fired too quick, his bullet kicking up dust an inch from Gunslinger's boot. The stranger didn't flinch. He didn't even draw yet. Silas Colton's grin twisted into a snarl. "Kill him!" 3 more shots exploded across the street. Lead whistled past Gunslinger's head, one slug tearing a hole through the edge of his dark duster. He moved like smoke in the wind, low, smooth, unnatural. In one fluid motion, his right hand dropped and both revolvers cleared leather. Bang! Bang! 2 of Colton's men dropped before they could fire again. One clutched his throat, gurgling. The other spun backward, with a red hole in his chest. The dusty street fell into a deadly hush, broken only by the click of Gunslinger's hammers. Abilene twisted in the grip of the man holding her, her wide eyes locked on the lone figure standing against 6. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. Colton roared and opened fire. His remaining men joined him in a storm of bullets, the air filled with smoke and thunder. Gunslinger stepped sideways, calm as death itself, his revolvers speaking in perfect rhythm. Another outlaw screamed and fell, clutching a shattered knee. A second bullet from Gunslinger silenced him forever, but the gang was closing in, trying to circle him. Gunslinger's black horse stamped once but stayed rooted, trained not to bolt. A bullet grazed the stranger's left arm, drawing a thin line of blood down the dark fabric. He didn't make a sound, only his cold eyes narrowed slightly. Suspense thickened the air like gathering storm clouds. Abilene's captor pressed a dirty knife to her throat. "Back off or the girl dies, Gunslinger!" Time seemed to slow. Gunslinger stood motionless in the swirling dust, revolvers lowered, but ready. Sweat rolled down Colton's scarred face as he reloaded with shaking hands. The two remaining gunmen looked nervous now, their earlier confidence cracking. The whole town held its breath behind locked doors. Windows cracked open just enough for fearful eyes to watch the deadly dance. Gunslinger's voice came again, low and flat. "Last chance. Let her go." Colton laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're bleeding, Drifter. You're just one man. We've still got numbers." Abilene's captor pressed the blade harder against her neck. A small drop of blood appeared. She bit her lip to stay silent, staring at Gunslinger with desperate hope. The wind howled down the empty street, lifting dust devils between the men. Gunslinger's fingers twitched near the triggers. His black horse snorted softly. Every heartbeat felt like a drum in the heavy silence. Colton raised his pistol again, aiming straight at Gunslinger's heart. His men followed suit. Abilene whimpered as the knife dug deeper. Then Gunslinger moved. Gunslinger moved like a ghost between bullets. The moment Colton's finger tightened on the trigger, the stranger dropped low and rolled. Lead tore through the space where he had stood, splintering the wooden post behind him. Dust exploded upward as he came up firing. One of the last gunmen screamed and collapsed, clutching his belly. The street reeked of gunpowder and blood, but suspense still hung thick in the scorching air. Abilene's captor kept the knife pressed to her throat, his hand shaking. Silas Colton circled slowly, eyes wild with rage and fear. Only 3 men remained standing against the lone gunslinger, yet the town felt frozen, as if one wrong breath could end everything. As Gunslinger rose, blood dripping steadily from his grazed arm, a rare flicker crossed his cold eyes. For a split second, the past clawed its way up from the darkness he kept buried. Years ago, he had been someone else. A young sheriff in a quiet border town called Redemption Creek. He had a wife and a little daughter who laughed like morning bells. Then one night, a gang much like Colton's rode in. They burned the town, slaughtered the innocent, and left his family hanging from the old oak in the square. He tracked them for 3 brutal years, becoming something more than a man. A shadow, a weapon. He buried his name with his dead wife and child. Now only Gunslinger remained. No home, no future, only the road, the black horse, and the cold justice he delivered wherever evil took root. Every time he drew, he saw their faces. Every kill brought him one step closer to becoming the very darkness he hunted. Abilene watched him through tear-filled eyes, her own haunted past rushing back in the silence between gunshots. She was no ordinary passenger. Born in the ruined settlement that once shared her name, Abilene had lost everything, men like Colton. Her father, a good rancher, had been shot resisting cattle rustlers. Her mother died of fever soon after, leaving 16-year-old Abilene to survive alone. She learned to ride hard, shoot straight, and trust no one. For 2 years she drifted, working saloons and stage lines, always one step ahead of the predators who saw a pretty face as easy prey. This journey was supposed to be her escape to a new life in the north. Instead, it led her back into hell, the knife at her throat pressed deeper. A thin line of blood trickled down her neck. "Stay back!" her captor yelled, voice cracking. Gunslinger stood perfectly still, revolvers smoking at his sides. His black horse pawed the ground once, sensing the deadly tension. Colton's breathing grew ragged. The wind moaned through the empty street, lifting curtains of dust that danced between the men like restless spirits. Every second stretched into eternity. One twitch, one heartbeat, and Abilene would die. "You got ghosts in your eyes, Gunslinger," Colton snarled, trying to mask his fear. "But I ain't dying today." Gunslinger's voice came low, almost a whisper. "Neither is she." Abilene met his gaze. In that moment, something passed between them. Two broken souls who had walked through fire and emerged colder, harder, and still breathing. Her past made her strong enough to endure the blade. His made him deadly enough to wait. The remaining gunman's finger trembled on the trigger. Colton raised his pistol. The captor's knuckles whitened around the knife hilt. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. One wrong move and the street would run red. Gunslinger's hands tightened imperceptibly on his guns. The suspense was unbearable. Time itself seemed to stop, waiting for the storm to break.